So today we're going to talk about an Etsy seller that has gone full-time and is earning over $200,000 per year selling coffee accessories on Etsy. But let's go ahead and run through their numbers and talk about the actual design of their products themselves to see what the kind of 3 rules were that got them to success. So CremaLoop started out in March of 2022. They were making coffee accessories, things like slow feeders and grinder upgrades for a very particular niche of coffee grinder. It started out with a couple of listings, and in their very first month they made $14. But in the second month they jumped from $14 to $1,200 by just adding 2 more products, which is a great success. That is how quickly these new products can scale up once you get started. But then by month 3, something even better happened. They got a shout out from a coffee influencer and sales immediately jumped to over $6,500. Now let me just lay this out for a little bit. Within the span of 3 months, they went from $0 to $6,500 per month in revenue. Why was this possible with only 4 products? Well, it's because they were very focused products. This is the very first rule. When creating a new product for 3D printing, you want to target some niche that people have a pain in. And coffee grinders are missing a lot of the accessories that they need because accessories are an expensive thing to create. But 3D printing and the effort to design something original can create something really valuable to the people who already have that item. So designing accessories is great, especially if you can target a very specific niche. This saves you from having to create some wild invention and instead just look at something that you use yourself and say, how could that be made better? And then design the thing that would make that better. And this was exactly the case here. Throughout the remainder of 2022, CremaLoop continued to have about $5,000 of sales per month, finishing out the year with about $45,000 in total revenue for a completely new business that just got started up, which is fantastic and is completely achievable. There was nothing that they were doing that someone else couldn't do. They were selling a designed product on Etsy. At this point, they only had 8 products total and were running like 6 printers in the back room. So in January of 2023, they had the largest month of their entire history, basically about $9,000 in a single month. But this is the year when they ran into their first real hump. In April, sales started to decline, and they went from the high of $9,000 in January and then fell all the way down to about $3,000 in June, which is a giant hit. And it's tough for a business to take that because you're planning on things continuing to stay consistent. But this is where rule number 2 kind of comes in. You have to be resilient. You have to be able to push on through. There will be ups and downs and seasonality to products. There might be a release that gives you a big old wave, but then it might fade off. You might just hit a season where people don't drink coffee because it's the summer and they don't want hot coffee and they're moving to iced stuff or whatever it may be. There's all kinds of things that will cause sales to decline. But really, one of the greatest driving forces of business success is continuing to exist. CremaLoop was able to push straight on through that low hump, and it paid off for them. Rather than saying, oh, this Etsy store had its moment, I sold all the things to all the people who wanted the accessory, it's dying off, I'm gonna kill it. Instead, Yan doubled down. He brought in his friend and they introduced 6 new products. Sales immediately doubled back up to 5,000 and then continued to grow on from there. In September, they did 9,000. In October, they did 95. In November, they did 14,000. And in December, they did 13,000. Ultimately, even though in the year of 2023, they had this colossal dip down from their previous highs, they were able to bounce back and more than double their sales to about $98,000 total in their second year of operation. And the 2 things that allowed them to do this were, number 1, being able to push through the low times. You have to be able to survive those low times, otherwise you will not survive as a business. But in addition to that, the way they dealt with it was by adding more products. And this is what many people don't realize. Many people think they'll have a single invention and then they'll use 3D printing to produce that single invention. But that's not using 3D printing. That's not taking advantage of that process. You can create all kinds of more products and experiment with what else people may want because it's so low cost to create a new item. But they were able to introduce new products and therefore gain more sales. And there's a tremendous competitive advantage to this too. The more products CremaLoop has, the harder it is for a competitor to enter and compete with them. Because the competitor doesn't have to just rip off a single item of of theirs, they have to rip off all of their items. And all of those items increase order value and make that store the one-stop shop to find new accessories. So the more products you can put into your shop that add more value, the stronger your shop is and the more resilient it is to competitors. And this process of being able to design a product and then just upload it and have it sold is totally new. And it actually leads straight into our sponsor, Teleport. Teleport is a new software that we developed that allows anybody to have access to our print farms. So that when you start a business like CremaLoop, you don't have to have a print farm. You can instead just focus on designing the good product and researching what niches you can go into. When you have the design, you can just upload it to Teleport, and when a customer orders the item, Slant 3D will print it and ship it directly to your customer for you. So you can check out Teleport over at slantpod.com, and you can sign up for free and start using it immediately. So if you want to start up an Etsy business and go from 0 sales to 1,400 in a single month, you can do that right now without ever having to buy a few printers to do it or ever having to pack a box. But let's get back to CremaLoop. So they finished out 2023, their second year, with about $100,000 in sales. That is fantastic and is an exceptional Etsy story. But now let's go ahead and look at 2024. In January, they were at 16,000, but then in February, they fell off a little bit from the holidays to 12, then back up to 14. And at this point, they introduced a second Etsy store, which helped them to continue to increase sales because they can diversify their ad spend around. And then sales slowed a little bit again. And in this time, Yan decided to start up a YouTube channel talking about his 3D print farms. It's called 3D Farmers. I highly recommend that you go over and check it out. He has really good content and is building up really good resources for how to price and how to find new products over there. So I recommend going and checking that out. But the sales kept on going, and in September they hit 13,000, and then October 11,000, and then they come back up in November to 13,000, and then they have a banger December of 31,000. In this time in 2024, they also introduced Shopify, and this gives them more independence from Etsy and allowed them to continue to increase sales, as well as the Shopify store lets you actually get found on Google more easily. Rather than simply being on Etsy's platform, you're now on the internet, and it's way easier to have your products be found. This is again a really big reason to find a strong niche, because when you have a strong niche, you can create search terms around it. The coffee grinders that Yan and CremaLoop are creating are very specific, and people would look for a particular accessory for that coffee grinder. So when they Google coffee grinder slow feeder, CremaLoop products are the top results because they're the only ones making the accessories. So throughout 2024, CremaLoop effectively doubled their product listings again and continued to double their revenue. So there might be a little bit more causation there than actual correlation. Let's talk about the products just a little bit here. Obviously, there was this fantastic growth curve. As they introduced new products, their sales basically increased with the number of products that they offered. If you double your number of products, you double your sales. Seems to be the trend so far. But you have to stay very focused. CremaLoop's products are really quite good because they use the 3D printing process effectively. Number one, they're able to create a lot of SKUs. But then they don't only create just 3D printed parts. They have stands that will restand the grinder and that kind of thing, but they add a lot of additional value by inserting magnets and adding other accessories like measuring cups and that kind of stuff to them, so that the accessory kits are actually kits and additions. They're things that add more value than just the 3D printed part, which is again a big differentiator because it's tough to add third-party parts to things. Anybody can buy a printer and start printing out fidget dragons, but to create an actual product requires more expansive manufacturing, process control, and quality control. But it so levels up your product so catastrophically. And that is what CremaLoop is doing by adding magnets and other accessories. But how can CremaLoop start to grow from here? They've doubled sales every year that they've been in existence, to where now they finished 2024 with nearly $200,000 in sales, and they need to do that again. Well, right now they're based in Switzerland, which means the vast majority of their sales will be in the continental EU. While they have premium products to where international shipping is not that big of a barrier, they could expand it even more by going to the United States. They could do this either by continuing to push US suppliers and that kind of thing and building accessories for US based grinders. Then they're able to focus on a more American type of brand than the ones that they use right now, which are very EU focused. The other thing they could do in order to eliminate that international shipping barrier is use an app like Teleport, where they can just upload their models and send them over. But there is a restriction on this because they have all the third-party components on it. So they would have to accessorize around what currently exists or design more pure 3D printed items. Pure 3D printed items let them scale more quickly because they don't have to build an assembly process for each one of these. But Yan Yan is now full-time on Etsy, so he is able to focus on production and packing of these items to make sure that the customer experience stays good. But yes, if CremaLoop wanted to continue to grow, they can continue to make better accessories for the existing niche that they have, or they can branch out to other brands and basically double their niche overnight. Because they have everybody who has this type of grinder buying their accessories. If they move over to this type of grinder, they now get a whole new customer demographic there as well. And they can continue to move that way. So this is just a fantastic example of just how large Etsy can be. There are many million-dollar Etsy stores out there, and certainly a lot of Etsy stores that produce $100,000 per year. So CremaLoop is an excellent example of actual real products getting made that otherwise would have never existed, but it's made possible by 3D printing, and it is able to be a sustainable full-time business. Have a great day, everybody.